James Gunn's new Superman movie hasn't even come out yet, and it's already facing a wave of criticism. Not because of the script, whose no one read, and not because of the acting, no one's seen it on screen yet. People aren't upset about the story. What they're reacting to is deeper, it's emotional. For many fans, Superman already had a face, and that face was Henry Cavill. And not just a face, but a tone. Dark, epic, tragic. A Superman that felt like he spoke the language of our time. Zack Snyder's version, introduced in Man of Steel in 2013, wasn't the smiling Boy Scout from the old days. He was divided. He struggled with moral choices. He had a hard stare and the weight of the world on his shoulders. In his very first appearance, he broke one of Superman's most sacred rules. He killed General Zod. Yes, Superman had taken lives in the comics once or twice, but never in the movies. And with that one choice, his innocence vanished. The incorruptible hero turned out to be vulnerable, not in his body, but in his spirit. Snyder gave us a Superman full of doubt, anger, and weight. And Cavill, with that rare mix of noble eyes and mythic build, played him like he was born to carry the symbol. Now James Gunn is offering something very different. His version feels brighter, more hopeful, more innocent, some might say. It even includes Crypto, Superman's dog. To fans attached to Snyder's darker tone though, this feels almost like betrayal. But maybe what really bothers people is not that Gunn wants to bring back hope, but that he's doing it in a world that's already forgotten how to believe in it. Maybe it's not the red cape or the white dog that feels out of place. Maybe it's the idea of a hero who still believes, despite everything. In a time where irony is a shield, cynicism is the default, and darkness is seen as more real than kindness, is there still a room for a Superman who looks up? Let's talk about what I call the Dark Knight effect, because The Dark Knight in 2008, directed by Christopher Nolan, was not just a great superhero movie. It was a movie that changed everything. Nolan did what no one thought was possible at the time. He turned a comic book into a crime thriller, a summer blockbuster into something thoughtful. It wasn't just a hit, it was a message. Superhero stories could be serious, grounded, and even a bit philosophical. Gotham felt real. The Joker was not a colorful or cartoonish character. He was pure chaos with a plan. It was a masterpiece, and like many masterpieces, it had side effects. After that, everyone tried to copy it, even James Bond in Skyfall. But most didn't understand what made The Dark Knight work. They didn't copy the depth, they just copied the surface. Dark lightning, serious dialogue, muted colors. They thought that being mature meant being dark. They thought that being serious automatically meant being deep. Darkness stopped being a creative choice. It became a formula, and they started putting every hero into that mold, even the ones who do not belong there. Because here's the truth, Superman is not Batman. Batman is built on trauma. Superman is built on hope. Bruce Wayne comes from the darkness of an alley, and Clark Kent arrives from the sky. And his power does not come from shadows, it comes from the sun. Trying to fit Superman into Gotham's logic is cutting off what makes him special. He does not need to be real. Superman is supposed to be ideal, and if anyone can bring the spirit back, it's James Gunn. He's the director who made us care about a talking raccoon and a tree that only says 3 words. In Guardians of the Galaxy, he turned something silly into something human. In his hands, a hopeful Superman does not feel naive. He feels necessary. Because maybe the most radical thing a superhero can do today is to remind us that doing good still matters. Welcome to this channel. I'm Bandido. If you've watched my videos or read my books before, thank you for coming back. And if this is your first time here, I'm glad you're here. This is a space where I explore movies, series, books, or any other cultural phenomenon I find interesting, not just for what they show us, but for what they reveal about ourselves. On this channel, storytelling is a mirror, a tool, and a compass. Welcome. Superman was created in 1938, at a time when the United States was still recovering from the Great Depression. His creators, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, were the sons of immigrants. Young men who dream up of an unbeatable hero who would fight for the forgotten. In that moment, Superman was more than a comic. He was a symbol of justice for regular people, a fantasy of strength and protection during hard times. A man who could stop a train with his hands, but also one who stood up for workers, and even went after corrupt politicians. His big jump into the pop culture came 3 years later, in 1941, when the Fleischer brothers turned him into an animated series. And here's something not everyone knows. Before that cartoon, Superman could not fly. He just jumped really high. But animating jumps was hard, so the animators decided it would be easier to just make him fly. A small technical change, but it transformed everything. It gave Superman a new kind of power. He didn't just move above the ground, he rose above it. It made him feel almost divine. And if you look even further back, before comics, before cartoons, you'll find Superman's story in mythology. He's like Hercules fighting monsters, like Samson with massive strength and a tragic fall. He's the child of the stars, but raised on Earth. What makes him special isn't where he came from, it's what he chooses to do with that gift. Because Superman does not act out of revenge, or guilt, or trauma. He's not trying to fix a broken past. He acts because he believes in something better. He chooses to help, not because he has to, but because he can. And in a world that always wants a dark reason behind every good action, that makes him rare. He's not just a man who can fly. He's a symbol of what it means to do good, just because it's right. One of the most common criticisms I've heard over and over again is that Superman is just too powerful, and that supposedly makes him boring. There's no real threat, no tension, because how do you make someone interesting when nothing can hurt them? It's a fair question, if you're only thinking about physical fights. And yeah, some stories go in that direction. They put him up against other Kryptonians like General Zod, or monsters like Doomsday, or clones like Bizarro. Basically, other versions of himself. These are giant battles, loud, epic, tragic, and sometimes beautifully done. But to me, the most interesting challenges Superman faces are not physical, they're emotional. Because here's the thing, Superman can feel fear, he can doubt himself, he can fail. Not in strength, but in choices. There are stories where his power becomes the threat, alternate versions where he's raised differently, or corrupted by the world around him. In Red Son, his ship lands in the Soviet Union instead of Kansas, and Lex Luthor becomes the hero. In Dark Knight Returns from Frank Miller, he's turned into a government tool sent to stop Batman. Those stories are fascinating, not because of what Superman does, but because of what he could become. But let's go back to the question. How do you make a nearly invincible character interesting? That question starts with the wrong assumption, that physical danger is the only thing that matters. But the best Superman stories flip that idea. His strength is not about muscle, it's about values. Some people say Superman is too simple, but simple is not the same as shallow. He doesn't constantly doubt himself. He doesn't fall apart with every challenge. He does the right thing, because that's who he is. That might make him predictable, but that's why he's compelling, because he's tested by the world around him, by tragedy, by moral gray areas, and he still chooses to stay true. The best stories don't ask, can he win? They actually ask, can he stay true to himself while winning? And in a world where everyone bends under pressure, watching someone stand firm, even in a comic, is not boring. It's necessary. There are many great Superman stories. Here are a few of my favorite comics. From the very first page, All-Star Superman tells you something simple and heavy. Superman is dying. No twist, no mystery. Just a man with limited time left. And yet, the story is not a tragedy. It's something else, something brighter. Written by Grant Morrison and drawn by Frank Quietly, All-Star Superman is not about watching a god fail. It's about watching a good man use his last days to keep doing good. Because even with a clock ticking down, Superman keeps showing up, keeps helping, keeps believing. And that's the heart of the story. He's not great because of what he can do. He's great because of what he chooses to do. This version of Superman is smart. He's not just strong, he's thoughtful, a scientist, a quiet problem solver. He doesn't just punch his way through obstacles. He thinks, he listens, and he cares. And he's also kind, deeply kind, even when the world doesn't always give that kindness back. One moment sums it up perfectly. He realizes the world is full of people who feel unloved, unseen, and instead of giving up to that sadness, he's a character that actually says, in a world without good friends, I can be a good friend. In a world that doesn't give love, I can give love. And that's it. That's Superman. Not a man that we're supposed to worship, but one we're invited to follow. We cannot fly, and we're not from another planet, but we can choose to do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when time is running out. And that's what All-Star Superman leaves you with. Not awe, but hope. In For the Man Who Has Everything, Alan Moore gives us one of the most powerful Superman stories ever told. Not by showing us how strong he is, but by showing us what he would give up. The setup is simple. It's Superman's birthday, and his friends show up with a gift. But someone else gets there first. Mongul, a villain, attaches an alien plant to Superman's chest. A parasite that traps him inside a dream. A perfect dream. One where Krypton never exploded, where his parents are still alive. He has a wife, a son, and he's happy. The fantasy is so perfect it almost feels real. And for a while, he believes it. But something in him starts to question it. A crack forms. The dream is too perfect, too easy. And then he makes the hardest decision. He lets it go. He walks away from the life he always wanted. A life with his family, a child, a world that could have been. He tears himself out of the fantasy because he knows that while he's dreaming, real people are in danger. So he wakes up, he fights back, and he returns to the real world. Flawed, broken, painful, but real. That moment, more than any punch, more than any feat of strength, is what makes him Superman. Because being a hero is not just about saving others. Sometimes it's about sacrificing what you want the most for the sake of someone else. And that's what Alan Moore reminds us here. Heroism is not about how much power you have. It's about what you choose to do when no one else is watching. In American Alien, writer Max Landis breaks Superman down to something simple. A kid growing up. Not the cape, not the suit, just Clark Kent. Awkward, unsure, figuring life out. We meet him as a confused boy, as a lovesick teenager, and then as a young Mar partying, dating, and trying to fit in. He's clumsy, he messes up, he does not know what kind of man he wants to be. And that's what makes him relatable. Because before he is Superman, he is just a kid from Kansas, trying to understand himself. One of the most powerful moments in the book comes at the end, when Clark faces Lobo, a wild, brutal alien who's not afraid of anything, and they fight hard. And for the first time, Clark realizes he might lose. Lobo tells him, "I'll be back on my feet in 10 minutes. But Clark, he's barely standing. And then it hits him. If he fails, there's no one else. He is Earth's last line of defense. And for the first time, he feels something close to fear. Not for himself, but for what might happen to everyone else. And that is where Superman is born. Not in the cape, not in the flight, but in that moment of responsibility. American Alien does not show us a perfect hero. It shows us a young man asking the question we all do. Am I enough? It's that humanity, that willingness to learn, that makes him Superman. Because before he lifted buildings, he had to lift himself and choose to fight. Let me know in the comments, what's your favorite version of Superman? Who's the first one that comes to mind when you see the Superman logo? Let's talk about the TV show Smallville, which started back in 2001. Looking at it now, it might feel like a show from a different era. A teen drama, a soap opera with low-budget effects, and some cheesy moments. But I say this with honesty, not just nostalgia. Underneath all that, Smallville understood something powerful. It knew who Superman was, and more importantly, where he came from. This was a time before streaming. No binge watching, no full season drop in one weekend. TV was weekly, slower, more personal. Each episode had to stand on its own and still build a bigger story. And in that format, Smallville did something a lot of movies haven't. It let us really know Clark Kent. Not the symbol, the person. The teenager who falls in love, who makes mistakes, who hides his powers, who gets angry, who falls down and learns how to get back up. This show is named after his hometown for a reason. Smallville isn't just a backdrop, it's the heart of the story. A small Kansas town where people still know each other, where family matters. And doing good is not just a grand idea, it's about how you treat the people around you. Clark didn't grow up with Kryptonian culture, but he did grow up in a community. And at the center of that community, are two people who shape everything for him, Martha and Jonathan Kent. They are not superheroes, they are just good people, but they raised the most powerful being on earth, with patience, love, and limits. Jonathan with his strong values, Martha with her quiet warmth. They didn't train a god, they raised a man. And that's what Smallville reminded us of, episode after episode. Superman is not made by his cape, or his powers, or even his famous suit, which he doesn't wear until the very end of the series. Superman is made by small choices made every day, by the people who believe in him long before the world does, by people who, without even realizing it, are shaping a hero. Jonathan and Martha Kent didn't just find a baby in the field. They welcomed him like the sky had answered a prayer. In some versions of the story, they had dreamed of having a child for years, sometimes after painful losses. After looking up at the stars, wondering if they'd ever be parents, and one day, literally, the sky answered. A ship crashed into their field, and inside it, a baby. Not a weapon, not a messiah, just a child. And without knowing exactly what they were getting into, they made a choice to raise him, to love him, to teach him. I want to pause here to talk about Jonathan Kent specifically, and how father figures are shown in modern TV. Because these days, it's rare to see a father portrayed as wise, strong, and grounded. Most of the time, dads are either absent, clueless, or the punchline. In Stranger Things, for example, the adults, especially the dads, are barely there. And when a father's heart does appear in a show, like Homer in The Simpsons, it's wrapped in comedy. The idea of a father as someone steady, wise, and emotionally present has been fading from pop culture for a long time, and it's not an accident. One of my favorite writers, Robert Bly, believed this started in the 1920s and picked up speed in the 1950s. The idea is this one. If they could convince young people that they deserve their own products, their own music, their own language, their own emotional universe, separate from that of adults, they would have a permanent, easy-to-target audience. And for that strategy to work, marketers had to push fathers aside. They had to make adults seem out of touch, like obstacles to be ignored. Because a strong adult asks questions, sets boundaries, protects, and that gets in the way of selling. So when we see a character like Jonathan Kent, it feels almost revolutionary. He's not perfect, but he's present, firm, fair, wise. He's the kind of father who plants a tree knowing he may not live to sit in its shade. He knows his son is different, but he doesn't raise him like a god. He raises him like a boy who still needs to learn humility. Jonathan Kent is exceptional. He's the dad who doesn't seek attention, but quietly holds his own world together. No superpowers, just strong, simple values. And in the end, what he teaches Clark is this. Real strength is not about control. It's about protection. And greatness does not come from the sky. It comes from how we walk on the ground. Let me be clear. The real Superman is Clark Kent, not the other way around. And here, if you let me, I'd like to politely disagree with Quentin Tarantino. In Kill Bill, there's this unforgettable scene where the character Bill gives a speech about Superman. He says Clark Kent is just a disguise, a way for Kal-El, the alien, to mock humanity. That Clark is weak, awkward, humble, and that those things are part of the joke. It's a powerful speech, but it's wrong. Clark Kent is not a costume. He is the core of who Superman is. Superman did not arrive on Earth as an adult. He was raised here by farmers in Kansas. And he learned how to take care of animals before he learned how to fly. He learned how to listen before he learned how to lift buildings. His values, his kindness, his sense of duty, none of that came from Krypton. It came from Martha and Jonathan Kent. From doing chores, schoolwork, and childhood friendships in a small town called Smallville. Superman does not pretend to be human. He is human. There's a moment in the comic American Alien that captures this perfectly. After a brutal fight, Lobo, this unstoppable alien, tells Clark, "You'll be dead, just like the rest of your people from Krypton." And Clark, bleeding and exhausted, says, "I'm not from Krypton, I'm from Kansas." And that's identity, that's heart. Kal-El might be his biological name, but Clark Kent is his story, his family, his truth. So no, Superman doesn't look down on humans. He looks at us with love and with respect, because he doesn't see himself as above humanity. He sees himself as part of it. Let's talk about villains, because if Superman is so powerful, then who could ever be a real threat? That's one of the most common questions people ask. A lot of Superman stories answer it by putting him up against someone just as strong. Other Kryptonians like General Zod, clones like Bizarro, or monsters like Doomsday, a creature made for one reason, to destroy. And these are epic battles, big, loud, and sometimes heartbreaking. But among all his enemies, there's one who stands out, not because of his physical strength, but because of his mind. Lex Luthor. Lex doesn't fly. He doesn't have powers. What he has is ambition, genius, and pride. A lot of pride. He truly believes the world should belong to him. Lex sees what happens when violence loses its moral compass. He's a symbol of ego without limits, power without empathy. And what drives him to hate Superman isn't just fear, it's jealousy. Because Superman is someone Lex cannot buy. He cannot outsmart. He cannot control. To Lex, Superman isn't just a hero. He's a threat to everything Lex believes. That greatness should come from hard work, from being human, from pulling yourself up without help from the stars. And that's what makes their rivalry so powerful. Lex isn't just fighting Superman fists, he's fighting his values. He represents cynical realism, while Superman represents hopeful idealism. Lex brings arrogance, Superman brings humility. Lex is the mirror, and every time they face off, it's not just about saving the world. It's about defending the idea that goodness still matters, even when it's hard to believe in. The most powerful version of Lex Luthor I've seen was not in the movies, and there's a simple reason for that. Movies do not have enough time. Even with great actors like Gene Hackman or Jesse Eisenberg, Lex is often reduced to a cartoon villain. Fun to watch, but kind of shallow. Big ego, big speeches, not much depth. But in Smallville, we had time. Seasons of time. Time to see Lex slowly become who he is. Time to explore his wounds, his potential, his pain. And played by Michael Rosenbaum, Lex became something we hadn't seen before. A human being. With fears, with contradictions, with dreams. To me, that's the most complete version of the character. Because Smallville didn't just show us the villain, it showed us what he could have been. And if we've talked about Jonathan Kent as the father who raised Clark, we also have to talk about Lex's father, Lionel Luthor, a man who was cold, controlling, and constantly disappointed in his son. He pushed Lex, judged him, denied him love. And that's where the damage started. Because Lex was not born evil, he was born hurt. And that's the version of the story that stay with you. The one where Lex is the fallen prince. It's a classic story. The one who could have brought light, but was instead consumed by his own darkness. In Smallville, you can see it clearly. Lex had the potential to be the great friend. Even Clark believed in it, because at one point, they were really friends. There was trust, respect, possibility. But pain is heavy, and when Lex falls, it's not out of cruelty, it's out of fear, pride, and the feeling that he'll never be enough. And yet, the most powerful part of that relationship is this. Clark never stops believing Lex can be saved, even after betrayal, even after everything, because Clark still sees that close friend. In fact, in the first episode, Clark saved Lex from a car crash. Lex says, "Thanks for saving my life." And Clark answers, "You would have done the same for me." And that's the heart of it. This story reminds us that even people who become villains once had something worth saving. Let's talk about love. Specifically, the kind of love that helps shape the strongest man in the world, Lois Lane. She's not just Superman love interest. She's not just there to be rescued. She's smart. She's fearless. She has a voice of her own. Lois Lane is a Pulitzer-winning reporter who says what she thinks and does not back down, even when the danger is right in front of her. And here's the thing. Lois is not strong because of the writers following some modern agenda. She's strong because women like her have always existed. Women who didn't need superpowers to face hard situations or speak their truth. In Superman's world, Lois means something bigger than girlfriend. She's the anchor. Clark Kent may have come from another planet, but it's with Lois that he chooses to build a life. Not because he needs her, but because she changes him. She's not his weakness, she's his strength. She challenges him, she keeps him grounded. She reminds him that being human is not something that he has to fake, it's something he already is. And here's the beautiful part. When the Man of Steel lets himself love and be loved, he does not become weaker, he becomes stronger, more human. In a world full of heroes who run from love, hide it, or treat it like a side plot, Superman puts love front and center. And that's worth saying out loud. Love is not weakness. Real love is where everything begins. It's the origin, the purpose. And yeah, sometimes it's the real superpower. Let's go back to the Superman from the movies. Because out of all the versions we've seen, there's one that left a mark far beyond scripts, budgets, or special efforts. Christopher Reeve. He didn't just play Superman, he became him. His face, his voice, the way he walked into a scene and made it feel timeless. He defined Superman for an entire generation. He was the first to make us believe that a man could fly and wield limitless powers, and more importantly, that a man could be kind while doing it. But the most powerful part of this story came after the movies. In 1995, a horseback accident left him paralyzed from the neck down. He could have disappeared from the spotlight. He could have stayed quiet, given up. But instead, he chose something else. He became a symbol of strength in real life. He spoke with grace. He inspired millions. He fought for medical research and disability rights. Everything while facing challenges most of us could not even imagine. And in that second chapter of his life, he looked more like Superman than ever before. Because even without the suit, even without the flight, even without the muscles, he was still him. Still choosing to do good, even when no one expected him to. His body may have broken, but his spirit didn't. And in a world that often confuses strength with toughness, Christopher Reeve gave us something rare, a real heart of steel. James Gunn is not trying to reinvent Superman. He's trying to remind us why we ever believed in him. Even though his movie hasn't come out yet, you can already feel it. This new version feels like a tribute, not just to the character, but to the spirit that made Superman timeless in the first place. Gunn is not copying anything, but he's honoring what came before, especially the films with Christopher Reeve. He's bringing back the bright colors, the hopeful tone, even the iconic music by John Williams. The one that for many of us still sounds like hope, because that's what those stories gave us, a lesson in belief. Belief in goodness, in each other, in ourselves. And I don't think Gunn is doing this out of pure nostalgia. I think he knows where we are. He knows we live in a time where cynicism is the default, where heroes talk with sarcasm, where darkness is sold as realism, and where hope feels a little outdated. But Gunn chooses a different path. He's done it before. In Guardians of the Galaxy, he turned a bunch of outcasts and weirdos into a family you'd die for. In the Suicide Squad, he dove into chaos and violence and still found moments of tenderness. He doesn't pretend the world is perfect. He just shows that even in the messiest places, there's still something worth saving. And now, with Superman, he's giving us an invitation. One that might sound a little cheesy, a little too pure for the world we live in. But that's exactly why it matters so much. Look up. Maybe we've spent too much time looking down. For danger, for flaws, for someone to blame. Maybe it's time we lift our eyes again. Not to escape the world, but to imagine it differently. To believe there's still room for kindness, for goodness, for a hero who is not out for revenge, but to inspire. And if anyone can remind us of that, it's Superman. And if anyone can tell that story with heart, that's James Gunn. The new Superman film seems to want something bigger than just rebooting a franchise. It seems to want to reconcile us with something we thought we'd lost. The idea that a man can be good, without cynicism, without irony, without trauma driving him forward. That it's possible for someone to give everything in the face of adversity. And maybe the hardest part of bringing Superman to life isn't writing the movie. It's us. Can we still take a hero like this seriously? A man who believes in his values, who honors his parents, who loves one woman, who who has a loyal dog, who fights not for glory, but to protect what he loves. Superman greatness is not just about how strong it is. It's about something deeper. He represents the ability to choose. He chooses light, even when he's surrounded by darkness. He chooses life, even when death, physical, spiritual, collective, feels too close. He chooses truth, even in a world full of lies. And that kind of choice, one that comes from the heart, not the mind, clashes hard with the world we live in now. Because today, being kind is often seen as naive. Forgiving looks like weakness. And being hopeful, that's considered unrealistic. But knowing the world can be dark isn't a revelation. It's not revolutionary or something we are not aware of. And the danger of darkness is that it spreads easily. It calls to more darkness. What's actually hard, what's brave, is resisting it, is choosing to be kind. And Superman doesn't ignore the darkness. He just doesn't become it. Characters like Clark Kent reminds us that besides cruelty, there are other forces in this world too. People who teach, who help, who forgive. And that's why Superman makes people uncomfortable. Because he's not a fantasy of perfection. He's a possibility, a question, a mirror. He reminds us what we could be if we chose with more courage, with more compassion. And when Clark shows himself exactly as he is, no irony, no masks, no cynicism, he leaves us with a question deeper than any external threat. Are we still capable of believing in what he stands for? Superman has been around for nearly 100 years. He has lived more lives than any other hero. Every generation has had their version. The radio shows, the Fleischer cartoons, the comics, Christopher Reeve, Smallville, Henry Cavill, each one different and somehow all the same. Because Superman doesn't belong to just one author. He's a torch, passed from hand to hand, kept burning by hundreds of authors who have told stories about him, and by millions of people who have read them, watched them, and believed in them, decade after decade, generation after generation. Now, it's James Gunn's turn to carry the flame. He'll do it in his own way, and hopefully, it'll be something special. But the real question isn't about the movie. The real question is about us. Today, are we still capable of believing in Superman? Or is Superman a symbol that doesn't belong in this time? Or is there still something in his story that speaks to us, that inspires us? Can we still imagine a world where strength comes from compassion? Look up. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Superman. If you'd like to help keep this channel alive, you can do a few simple things. Leave a comment with a topic you would like to see in the next episode. Subscribing to the channel would be awesome too. It really makes all the difference. And if the story of Superman resonated with you, you'll probably enjoy my books too. I'm not James Gunn, but I do try to tell stories that speak to the heart, and maybe stay there for a while. My book, Forsetti, the Son of Earth, is about a superhero who can fly, have super strength, hit vision, and I should stop there. I don't want to get sued. I believe it's my best book yet, and it's one that dives into memory, myth, and what it means to stay human as the world begins to fall apart. It's about a team of superheroes whose best days have passed, about joining the team and embarking, without their knowledge, to their very last adventure together. I'll leave the link below. That's all for now, compadre. Thanks for watching.